now on part 3 of Secret of the Winning Streak. Gosh, how time has flown. So we have today's session, and then next week is our last one, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that you're all enjoying them so far. Today, we are going to continue with using maths in some more real-life scenarios. So not looking at sums and all those slightly more boring things, but trying to really understand how we can use mathematics to problem solve and have all these really complicated situations and simplify them mathematically, okay? So we're going to start with a very common problem that I'm sure that's happened to multiple people before, bag mix-up. And what's happened is Thomas and his friend Dan are going on holiday. Thomas has a bag of jumpers and Dan had a bag of t-shirts. But unfortunately, while they were packing, all the labels got mixed up. And now they don't know which bag is which bag. But before we leave for the airport, we do need to know whose bag is whose. But we don't have time to open all of the bags again. So we're only opening one of them. How can we find out? How can we figure out which bag belongs to who? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. And the 30 seconds starts now. And can you please pop your answers into the chat? So knowing that we can only open one of them, how do we know whose is whose?
Oh, we're getting a lot of half answers, I'd say, but we have just received one that's a bit fuller in terms of the amount that they of meat on the bone, shall we say that way, with someone that says, if we open one, just check if it's jumpers or not and put the correct label.
Okay, very interesting. So what happens if they're not jumpers? And that's where we come into this next slide. We have what we call a solution tree. And in this solution tree, that person is exactly right. So if we open the bag, one of the bags, and we find that it's jumpers, we know that that bag's label should be jumpers. And there's only one of the situation which can happen. There's only one of the bag. So if we open the jumper bag, the other bag must therefore be the t-shirt. So we don't need to open that bag as well. We know that that's where those two labels belong.
One thing to mention, though, so as Eva mentioned, the key to this problem is the fact that we know that all the labels have been mixed up. So actually, in this case, we don't even need to open the bags. Because we know that the labels have been mixed up, Dan's should be Thomas's and Thomas's should be Dan's. So that's the key thing, though. All labels are mixed up.
Yeah. And that's going to be very important when coming into this next question, so keep that in mind, okay? We're going to move on. So on the way to the airport, Thomas and Dan pick up their friend Will to join them on holidays. And Will is bringing jumpers and t-shirts, where Thomas is just bringing jumpers and Dan's only bringing t-shirts. However, once they get to the airport, the labels are all mixed up again. I don't know what these three are doing, but for whatever reason, they cannot keep their bags in order, okay? So the one thing we do know, we get to the airport, and we know that none of the labels are correct. But airport security is only letting us grab one of the bags and one thing randomly from that bag. So how can we figure out whose bag is whose? By knowing all of these facts, remembering we know for a fact that all of the labels are wrong, and we can only choose one thing from each bag. So pop into the chat. You have 1 minute. Try and have a think. How can we figure out whose bag is whose? There was an interesting suggestion in the earlier session, in the Welsh one, in which someone said to weigh the bags.
Oh, and we've just had that suggestion again, Eva, something to do about the weight, possibly.
Well done. Okay, that's also a really interesting solution. So it's not the solution we're looking for today, because we could have, say you have a jumper that's slightly heavier, but in Thomas's bag, he could only have one jumper. But Dan,
but also we didn't know what the weights were to begin with. So you could say the heaviest one would probably be jumpers, but I have some very light jumpers.
And
some very heavy t-shirts.
And some very heavy t-shirts. It's a difficult one to call.
Exactly. And that's the exact thing. We don't know anything about the weight. So even though we can normally tell, yes, a jumper is normally heavier than a t-shirt, we can't tell that for fact. And the thing about maths, we need to be distinct. We need to know exactly what we're trying to say. Okay, our minute is up. So I wonder what type of solutions we've come to.
We have got one that's sort of the start of the solution, I'd say, Eva, that says, open the one that says it's Will's, because it must be just one piece of clothing. So that person is referring to the fact that the label is incorrect And I think that's sort of the beginning of the answer, isn't it?
That is correct. Well done to the person who noticed that. So this is what all the options we actually have. So if we look at Will's bag, the last one, you are exactly right. Because we know that bag does not belong to Will, it only has either jumpers or t-shirts. In the other two bags, in Dan and Thomas's, we could have jumpers and t-shirts, or t-shirts and jumpers and t-shirts. So Will's bag is very important. It's key to be opening into this, to have this solution. And you're exactly right, because there will only be one option in the other thing. If we were to open Dan or Thomas's bag, Dan and Thomas's bags, even though we know their labels are wrong, and there's jumpers and t-shirts in there, we can't tell whose bag is whose. So Will's bag is very important. And here is our solution tree. So while opening the bag that has Will's label, we will either get jumpers or t-shirts. If we get jumpers, we know for a fact that that bag has to be Thomas's. And so we take Thomas's label and pop it onto that bag. We then know, with the other two bags that are left over, that Dan and Will's labels are wrong. So Dan's label is on his bag and that hasn't been moved. But we know that that label has to be incorrect. So it has to move over to the extra bag, and Dan's bag must be Will's. But if you open the bag and it has t-shirts, we know that that bag is Dan's bag. And the same thing again, we therefore know that this bag is no longer Will's, so it has to move over to another bag. But the Thomas label also has to switch, because what was the core fact originally? All of the labels are wrong. And so we know that all of the labels have to move around.
And that is the key thing, I think, isn't it? Because that I had to double check during the last meeting. It went over my head slightly. But the important thing is that initially, at the beginning of this problem, every label is on the wrong bag. Every single one is wrong. So if you can correct one, then the other two you can just swap over. Is that how am I explaining that right? Because I know last week I explained something completely wrong, didn't I, Thomas?
Essentially, as you're breaking it down to the last problem. If you can solve one bag, it goes back to the two bag problem, and you know that they just swap.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, that was a complicated one, and I'm very impressed by anyone who started to get on the right road to the right answer. So well done, everyone, if you managed to see through the will part of the solution. Very good. And
that is what unlocks this entire question. So well done for noticing that, because it is complex. These questions are here to stretch you and really stretch your understanding. In the next part we're going to do, it's not possible you understand everything that's happening, but that's okay. We're not here to understand everything all the time. Thomas and me, in our day-to-day work, we don't understand everything we're working with. That's our job, is to try and figure it out and see how we can better our understanding.
But what I'll also say is that's why we use these kind of solution processes like trees, that if we can draw out all of our understanding, then hopefully we can get to a solution for the full problem. But, as you're drawing a solution tree, you may get to a part that you don't understand. So that's the part you need to work on. You're trying to break the big problem down into smaller and smaller sub-problems.
And someone else said next time maybe they should just buy different kinds of bags. That would also.
They were on offer. It was buy two get one free. So.
So you tell Thomas, Dan, and Will, because they keep mixing their labels. They need to be told. Well done. Okay, we're going to move swiftly on to the next problem, which is the chicken, fox, and the grain. It is very possible you've heard about this problem before, but it's still very complex and it still confuses me to this day just a little bit. So what we're going to have a simpler version first. And we're going to look at, one day a farmer wants to cross a river, but they must travel by boat. There's only space in that boat for the farmer and one other thing. And he has to transport a chicken and some grain to the other side, okay? But if left alone, the chicken is going to eat the grain. And we don't want that. We want the full bag of grain to get to the other side. So when the farmer is there, everything's okay. When the farmer's there, the chicken knows he's not allowed to misbehave. So that is the key part to this problem. So here is my question. How did the farmer get everything to the other side? You have 1 minute. I'm going to start that now. Pop your answers into the chat.
So this is a bit of a warm-up question for everyone, just in case you thought that this is what Eva was referring to when she was confused. I'm pretty sure she would be able to answer this one. Am I right, Eva?
Yes.
But yeah, we've got some answers coming in, and someone jumped in pretty quickly with the shortest possible way of answering it, I would have said, with 3 words. And I'll go back to that one once the time has come to an end. I've got to praise everyone really in the chat at the moment. It's an exemplary meeting so far because everyone is only using the chat to send us messages. Felly da iawn chi. Thank you very much, everyone. It really does help us keep an eye on what you're telling us.
Because normally a lot of these sessions they can be a little bit easier to do in person sometimes, but what we want to do by doing these sessions online is to be able to talk to as many as you as possible all the time, so we give it a fair chance for everyone to be included. But as a part of that, we want to know what you think. We really want to see what your answers are and try and help you work your way through these questions yourselves.
But yeah, we've got a lot of answers, and they're all getting to the gist of the fact that you're going to need to cross the river once with the chicken and then again with the grain. So you'll have to return to go and get one of them. Does it matter which order we go in, Eva?
Well, let's have a look. So if we take the chicken over first, then we're going to come back and we're going to get the grain. We're going to take the grain over first, then we're on the other side. So the answer to your question is no. If we take the grain over first and leave the chicken by itself and then come back to get the chicken, that's absolutely fine because they're not together by themselves. That is the key part. All is well. The question is going to get a little bit more complex now. And the fox is on the scene. So if farmer wants to cross a river, he has to travel by boat and he has to transport a chicken, a fox, and some grain to the other side. But the farmer can only carry one other thing in the boat. However, if left alone, the fox will eat the chicken. The fox and the chicken, they're not great friends. They don't really like each other. And so they don't want to be, they will start to fight if they're by themselves together. The chicken will eat the grain because the chicken's very hungry and will like to eat the grain. But if the fox and the grain are together, everything is okay because the fox doesn't like grain. It's not tasty to it, so he doesn't mind being alone with the grain. I'm going to give you another 2 minutes this time. This is a longer question. It's a lot more complicated. How do we get all 3 things to the other side without anything going wrong? So the 2 minutes started now. Oh, no, it hasn't. There we go. No, it has started.
The common question here is always, why is a farmer taking a fox with him? You know, the fox is a wild animal.
That is a very good question.
But yeah, maybe don't worry too much about that element.
Don't listen to Thomas, people.
in this theoretical problem, we'll ignore that fact, perhaps. And yeah, we're getting a lot of answers rolling in, suggesting possible orders, but I think a lot of you need to add some detail. So really, really think about how and in which order you might need to do this.
Remember what we spoke about in the last few sessions, which is in maths, we really need to try and be as clear as possible all the time. We want to make sure that no one can interpret what we mean. We want to be able to be really clear this is what I mean and this is what's happening. So try and explain your entire question, your entire answer as clearly as possible. So I can't try and poke holes in your answer. I can't say, oh, what about this? What about this? Because you've already mentioned that can't happen for whatever reason.
I think we're down to the last sort of 45 seconds.
You can see one really lovely long answer here, which looks nice and explicit, which well done. I'm really enjoying seeing these paragraphs getting a little bit more and more precise each time. It's showing that you're getting better because these are also really useful when we're in class and we're doing like some questions. If you ever do reasoning, so you get these problem-solving ones, a lot of your teachers will say you need to try and be as clear as possible, and that is what maths is, to really try and as clearly as possible explain what we mean to other people. So while doing these sessions, you're practicing that skill, which is great to see. Well done, everyone.
Just as a suggestion, as a way of making your answers more precise, never try to use it or that or this. Try and be, or whenever you refer to something, always try and be as clear as you can about what you're talking about. So, it gets bigger. What gets bigger? Always try and be as clear as possible and refer to the thing you're, it might get a bit laborious, if you're saying about the fox gets bigger, then the chicken gets bigger, and then the grain gets bigger. You may want to refer to it, but it just makes your answer that much clearer.
Yeah, it means that
Now,
no one can say, what do you mean?
someone is very, very keen for us to see their answer, but to be fair, they have got a point that they'd like us to see it because I've seen them copy and paste it 3 or 4 times in the chat.
Okay.
But they haven't quite finished, but I'll give you the beginning. Take the chicken across first, leaving the fox with the corn. Drop the chicken on the far bank and return to the first side alone. Take
Lovely.
the fox across next, depositing it, and I like that use of depositing it on the far side and collecting the chicken again. But that's where the answer stops. But I think that they're almost there, aren't they?
You are on the right track. Well done to that person. That is really clear, very explicit. I'm really liking that answer. So you are exactly right. There's an idiom in Welsh which is llygad y lle, and I'm not sure what that equivalent would be in English, but you're hitting the nail on the head. You're really close to it. Well done. So we're going to start. We're going to start the way you've started in your question. We're going to take the chicken to the other side. The farmer's going to pop back over by himself, and now he's going to take the grain over instead, which I believe you said the fox, which we'll see later if that matters. So we're going to take the grain over. But the important part is he's put the chicken straight back into the boat so that the chicken and the grain aren't together. The farmer's going to go back over, and here is the last part I think you possibly missed at the end of your answer, which is okay. You've still given us a really good half of the answer. He's going to pop the chicken back over to the left-hand side and going to take the fox back over to be with the grain, because the fox and the grain are now by themselves while the farmer goes back over to get the chicken, and then going to take the chicken back over at the end. So well done. That was a really good, very clear answer so far. Haven't quite finished it, which is absolutely fine, because that happens sometimes. If you can't always finish it, do what you can, and that was really well done. So thank you for that. There's an interesting point to this, which leads on to the last slide I'm going to show you, which is you mentioned that the fox could go after the chicken. So you take the fox over and pick up the chicken, but I took the grain over and picked up the chicken. I'm going to show you a cube. And this cube represents our question. I know it's really hard to see sometimes, but I promise I'm going to try and explain it as best as I can. And if you don't understand it straight away, that's absolutely fine. It is hard. But this cube simplifies our entire question into 2 different paths along these blue lines, one going to the right and one going to the left, okay? If we look at these axes, on this left-hand side, we can see chicken right bank, chicken left bank, grain right bank, grain left bank, fox left bank, fox right bank. So we're starting on the left bank. You can see at this point, you've got the fox, the grain, and the chicken all on the left. The first step we always have to do is take the chicken along to the right bank. So we're moving up. As you can see, this axis is going up. So the chicken is now on the right bank. But we now have 2 options to get to our last answer. You can go right and take the fox over to the right bank, which is what the person that answered the question originally said, I believe. But we took the grain over, so I'm going to follow the grain path for now. So we've taken the chicken up to the right bank, and we've also now taken the grain to the right bank. But we now have to take the chicken back to the left bank in order to then drop it off, pick up the fox, and take the fox over to the right bank. And then only then, with the fox and the grain on the right bank and the chicken on the left, can we then take the chicken up to the top, to the left bank, to the right bank as well. But we can also follow the same pattern on the exact opposite side. So we could go chicken to the right, and then pick up the fox and take that to the right, then take the chicken back over to the left, the grain, and then the chicken. So it doesn't actually matter which way, because the key fact that the fox and the grain can be together and nothing happen, but the chicken can't be with the grain or with the fox by itself. So well done you for finding that different answer. I'm really, really impressed. Well done. Thomas, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Again, it comes back to this idea of visualization. Mathematics is a very visual science because we deal a lot with thought. We deal with high dimensional spaces because a good question is here is, well, we have fox, chicken, and grain. What happens if you add a 4th thing in? You'd have to deal with 4 dimensions. You can't draw, well, you can draw it roughly, but it's hard. So whenever we can, pictures are a really great help at presenting what you mean. It's often said a picture is worth 1,000 words, and the clearer a picture is, the more words it's worth.
Yeah, I've just seen someone in the chat say the word confusing, which is absolutely fine. This is confusing. I would not have been able to make this cube myself. Someone else had made this cube and simplified this really complicated question for other people, which is absolutely fine. This happens in mathematics, and this is what a mathematician's job is to try and take this really cool, quite complicated system and try and simplify it as much as possible. But just in one picture, like Thomas said, we can see all the different possible combinations of what can happen to allow this question to work. And isn't that cool?
Another way of thinking about it is that mathematicians often try and convert questions between different fields. So we changed a logic problem into a geometric problem. By crossing out the lines that can't possibly be, we see all the possible solutions. Whereas, as we saw from your answers, you only may have found one solution, and you'd probably be happy with that. By converting it into a different field, geometry, we're able to generalize the solution.
Very, very cool.
And then ni wedi dod I ben rwan. We've actually come to the end of the session, a very enjoyable one, and it was a bit of a head scratcher for me, to be fair, Eva and Thomas. Thank you very much for your time once again. But I'm already looking forward to our last session next week. Felly, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone who joined us. We'll see you next week. Hwyl am y tro.
Diolch yn fawr. Hwyl fawr.
Tara pawb.